Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's really good to have you with us today.
Yeah, definitely. Glad to be here.
Today we are pushing the boat out a little further than usual, I think. We usually talk about tech or history or the mechanisms of how the world works.
Economics, psychology, that sort of thing.
Right, exactly. But today we have a stack of notes that deals with something much more fundamental. We are basically talking about the architecture of reality itself.
It's really not an exaggeration to say that. We are looking at a text today that fundamentally challenges the way we process information.
Yeah.
It asks a very uncomfortable question, which is it possible to be a genius, to be the smartest person in the room, to have literally all the data, and yet be completely catastrophically wrong about the most important thing in the universe?
That is a tension I think everyone listening has felt at some point, you know. You look at the experts,
Oh, for sure.
the people with the degrees, the accolades, the power, the verified check marks, and sometimes they miss it.
They completely miss the heart of the matter.
Right. You see brilliant people making decisions that seem to lack basic fundamental wisdom.
Precisely. And the source material we are analyzing today, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, argues that this isn't accidental. It's not just a glitch in the system.
It's a feature.
Exactly. The author, Paul, argues that there is a specific type of wisdom, a hidden wisdom, that is structurally inaccessible to human intellect.
Meaning you can't just think your way into it.
Right. It doesn't matter how high your IQ is, you cannot access this wisdom with a human brain alone.
And that right there is the hook. We are looking at a text where the author claims that the most powerful, intelligent rulers of his age made a fatal mistake.
Because they were using the wrong tools.
Exactly. They were trying to use the wrong tools to understand God. He's basically saying to them, you cannot IQ your way into the deep things of God.
Which is a massive claim to make. I mean, it suggests a hard limit to human capability.
It really does.
It suggests that there's a ceiling to what we can know through science, philosophy, logic, all of it.
So here is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to decode this argument from Paul. He is writing to a group of people in the city of Corinth.
Which was a city totally obsessed with status and smarts, by the way.
Right. They love their rhetoric and their philosophers.
Yeah.
And he is systematically dismantling their worldview. So we're going to break this down into 4 distinct movements to really get the full picture for you guys.
First, we have to look at the mystery. Specifically, we need to analyze the crucifixion, the event that absolutely stumped the rulers of the age. We need to understand why they missed it.
Right. Then we're going to look at the mechanism. Because if human brains can't get there, if our neural networks are just insufficient, how do we get the info?
Right, there has to be a way.
And Paul lays out this fascinating explanation of how the spirit functions as a bridge.
Then we'll pivot to the method. This is where it gets highly practical. Because Paul possessed this wisdom, his actual behavior changed.
He abandoned eloquence, right?
He did. He actively leaned into weakness. And we need to understand the strategy behind that because it is so counterintuitive.
And finally, we will land on the mind of Christ. The text ends with this massive, sweeping statement that we actually possess this perspective. So let's unpack this.
Let's dive in.
I want to start with section 1, the mystery. We are looking at verses 6 and 7 of 1 Corinthians 2.
Okay.
Paul starts off by saying, "We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature." But then he immediately starts clarifying what it is not.
Right. He is drawing a very sharp line in the sand right out of the gate. He says this is not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing.
Let's pause on that phrase for a second, coming to nothing.
Yeah.
That feels brutal. It feels incredibly dismissive of the entire power structure of his day.
It is a brutal assessment, but I think it's primarily a chronological one.
How so?
Well, he is saying that the current systems of thought, the prevailing logic of the Roman Empire, the Greek philosophical schools, all of it has an expiration date.
It's temporary.
Exactly. He looks at the most powerful men in the world and says, you are on a timer. You are expiring.
That is a very bold stance to take when you are part of a minority marginalized religious group.
Yeah.
But he contrasts this expiring wisdom with something else. Look at verse 7. He calls it God's wisdom.
And look at the specific descriptors he uses there. He calls it a mystery that has been hidden. And he says God destined it for our glory before time began.
Before time began. That instantly changes the scale of the conversation.
It really does. This isn't just a new philosophy Paul came up with in a coffee shop to compete with the Stoics or the Epicureans.
Right. He's not just launching a new podcast.
No. He is arguing that this wisdom predates existence itself. It was baked into the fabric of reality, but it was actively kept under wraps.
Let's talk about that word mystery, because in a modern context, a mystery is like a Sherlock Holmes
A
novel.
whodunit.
Yeah, exactly. It's a puzzle. If I find enough clues, if I dust for fingerprints, if I use my massive brain power, I can solve the mystery. Is that what Paul means here?
Not at all. And that distinction is absolutely vital for this whole text.
Okay, unpack that.
In the ancient Greek context, and specifically in the way Paul uses it, a mysterion isn't a puzzle you solve by thinking harder. It is a secret that is physically impossible to know unless someone pulls back the curtain and shows you.
So it's the difference between investigation and revelation.
That's a great way to put it. Investigation is us working our way up to the truth. Revelation is the truth coming down to us.
Okay, that tracks.
Paul is talking about a truth that was literally hidden. You couldn't stumble upon it in a lab or deduce it in a debate. It had to be revealed.
And the proof that it was hidden, the ultimate proof that human investigation doesn't work, is found in verse 8. And this is really the aha moment of the text for me.
Yeah, this is the turning point.
Paul says, none of the rulers of this age understood it.
None. That is a comprehensive sweep. He is talking about the political authorities, the religious hierarchy, the cultural influencers, everyone at the top.
And he proves they didn't understand it with a hard, undeniable historical fact. He says, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory.
We really need to sit with the irony of that statement for a minute.
Go ahead.
Think about who actually crucified Jesus. It wasn't the uneducated mob running the show.
No, it was the state.
It was Pontius Pilate representing Roman law, which was the greatest legal administrative system the ancient world had ever seen.
Right.
And it was the Sanhedrin representing the law of Moses, the greatest moral and religious system of the time.
So these were literally the best and the brightest, the elite of the elite.
They were. And they looked at Jesus, who Paul refers to as the Lord of glory, and their human wisdom told them, this man is a problem.
He's disrupting the peace.
Exactly. He is a threat to stability. The smart, logical, rational move here is to eliminate him.
They thought they were solving a problem. They genuinely thought they were winning.
Precisely. They thought they were basically conducting waste management. Get rid of the radical, keep the peace, maintain the power structure.
It was a very pragmatic decision.
It was a perfectly logical decision based on the wisdom of the age.
But Paul is saying if they actually had this hidden wisdom, they would have realized that by crucifying him, they were actually unlocking the very mystery God had destined for glory.
They played right into the plan they couldn't even see.
It's the ultimate backfire.
It really is. Their highly educated wisdom led them to commit the ultimate error, killing the author of life. It shows so clearly that human smarts can be completely blind to spiritual reality.
You can be politically savvy, legally brilliant, and still be dead wrong about God.
Completely dead wrong.
So the rulers failed. But why? Was it just bad luck? Or is there a structural reason why they couldn't see it?
Paul answers that directly in verse 9. And he does it by basically dismantling the human toolkit for learning.
He quotes scripture here, right?
Yeah.
Referencing Isaiah.
Yes. He says what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived.
I love this list. It is so exhaustive. Eye, ear, mind. It sounds like he is covering every single base of how humans process data.
He absolutely is. Think about how we learn literally everything we know.
Okay.
Eye represents empirical data. Science, observation, measurement. We look at the world, we use telescopes, we use microscopes, we gather visual evidence.
And ear represents tradition, right? Learning, lectures, history, listening to the experts who came before us.
Exactly. It's the transmission of information from one person to another. And mind, that represents imagination, logic, philosophy, pure internal reasoning.
So Paul is saying, take your best empiricism, the eye, take your best education, the ear,
Right.
and take your best rational logic, the mind, combine them all together, push them to their absolute theoretical limit.
And you will still hit a hard ceiling.
Wow.
He says those tools cannot access the things God has prepared for those who love him.
That is incredibly humbling, maybe even a little terrifying for a modern listener,
Well, because we worship that toolkit.
We really do. We live in a world that absolutely worships data and logic. We tend to think if we just get enough data, if we just run the right algorithm, we can solve any problem in the universe.
And Paul is saying, hey, data and logic are great for building bridges or curing diseases, but they cannot get you here.
They're the wrong tools for the job.
It's like trying to pick up a radio signal with a butterfly net. It doesn't matter how good your net is or how fast you swing it, it is simply not designed to catch radio waves.
Or it's like trying to explain the concept of color to someone who was born completely without sight.
Oh, that's a good one.
You can explain the physics of light waves, you can describe the heat of the sun on their skin, but they cannot inherently know red. They lack the receptor.
That is a perfect analogy. The rulers in Jerusalem were colorblind to the glory of God.
They just saw a criminal.
They saw a criminal bleeding on a cross. They didn't have the capacity to see the redemption of the whole world unfolding.
So if the butterfly net our eyes, ears, and brains doesn't work, and if the smartest rulers failed because they were using the wrong tools, how on earth does anyone get this information?
Are we just permanently stuck in the dark?
Yeah, are we?
That brings us to section 2, the Spirit's role. This is the mechanism we mentioned earlier.
Okay, let's look at verse 10. It provides the solution immediately. It says, "These are the things God has revealed to us by his Spirit."
There is that word again, revealed.
Apocalypsis in Greek, right?
Yes. It means an uncovering. The curtain is actively pulled back by someone else.
So the Spirit is the bridge. The Spirit is the decryption key for the hidden wisdom.
Yes. And Paul explains why the Spirit is uniquely qualified to do this. He says, the Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God.
The deep things. That phrase sounds incredibly vast. It implies the innermost counsels, the profound logic, the very heart of God's plan.
It's the deepest water possible. And then in verse 11, Paul gives us this brilliant, very relatable analogy to help us understand the actual mechanics of this.
He compares it to human self-knowledge.
Right. He asks, who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them?
Let's really unpack that because it's essentially a psychological deep dive right in the middle of a theological text.
It is. Think about it. I am sitting here in the studio with you right now. I can observe you. I can hear what you say. I can see what you do. I can even look up your bio online.
Sure.
But I cannot truly, fundamentally know your internal monologue.
That's entirely true. I could be smiling at you right now, nodding along, but internally, I could be worrying about my car making a weird noise or making a mental grocery list.
Yeah.
Or judging your choice of tie.
Hey now.
You don't know.
I don't. I can guess. I can infer based on your body language.
Yeah.
But I cannot know for a fact. I am forever an outsider to your internal world.
Only my spirit, my consciousness inside me has insider status.
Exactly. You are the only one who has the login credentials to your own mind.
I like that. So Paul applies this exact logic to God. He says in the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God.
So human wisdom, even the absolute best theology or philosophy, is an outsider perspective trying to analyze God from a distance.
It can guess, it can speculate, but it can't actually know.
Right. It is looking at the smile and guessing about the grocery list. But the Spirit is not an outsider. The Spirit is internal to God. The Spirit knows the thoughts of God because the Spirit is God.
So to know God's thoughts, to access that hidden wisdom we were talking about, you essentially need God's own consciousness transplanted into you.
That sounds incredibly radical, almost sci-fi, but that is exactly what verse 12 claims actually happened to the believer.
Let's read it. He says, "What we have received is not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God."
Note the contrast again. There is a spirit of the world.
What does that mean to you? The spirit of the world.
I tend to think of it as the default operating system of humanity, the zeitgeist.
Okay, the prevailing wind.
Yeah, it's the collective human drive for survival, status, power, ego. It's the exact energy that drove the rulers to crucify Jesus because they desperately wanted to maintain their control.
And Paul says that is not what you received. You received the Spirit from God. And there's a very specific function to this reception. It's not just a spiritual badge of honor.
No, look at the very next phrase. He says, so that we may understand what God has freely given us.
Understand, that's the key word there.
The revelation is a gift, he says, freely given, but the actual understanding of that gift requires the Spirit.
So you can have the gift right in front of your face, like the rulers had Jesus literally standing right in front of them. But without the Spirit, you don't even understand what you're looking at.
You see a peasant carpenter from Nazareth. You see a political disturbance of the peace. You do not see the Lord of glory.
Because context changes everything, and the Spirit provides the context. It allows you to see the raw data through God's eyes.
And this extends to how Paul speaks and teaches too. Look at verse 13. He says, this is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit.
He's being very logically consistent here. If the source of the information is the Spirit, not the human mind, then the vocabulary must also be spiritual.
Exactly. He says he is explaining spiritual realities with spirit-taught words. Or, as some of the footnotes in the text suggest, interpreting spiritual truth to those who are spiritual.
It's almost like needing a technical language.
How do you mean?
Like, if you and I are quantum physicists, we absolutely need the vocabulary of physics to describe what is happening inside an atom. If we try to explain quantum entanglement using the vocabulary of, say, gardening or baking, we're going to lose all the nuance. It won't work.
You need the right words for the right reality. That's a great way to frame it.
Paul is basically saying that human wisdom, the high-level rhetoric of the Greek philosophers, doesn't even have the vocabulary for these deep things. It's too limited.
It's a fundamental mismatch. So he uses spirit-taught words to convey the message to people who actually have the spirit to decode them.
Okay, so we've established that the message is a mystery that completely stumped the elites. We've established that the spirit is the only way to decode it because the spirit is the insider.
Right.
This brings us to section 3, the method.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Because Paul didn't just teach this theory in a vacuum. He lived it out.
He practiced what he preached.
Literally. And when we look back at the first 5 verses of this chapter, we see that this theology completely altered his behavior.
He did, and honestly, it's pretty startling because Paul was a smart guy.
Very educated.
Right. He could hang with the intellectuals of his day. But look at verse 1. He says, "When I came to you, I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom."
He explicitly, intentionally rejects being a smooth talker.
Which is wild, considering the culture.
Oh, in the Greco-Roman world, rhetoric was everything. Being able to persuade a crowd with beautiful arguments, logical traps, and emotional manipulation, that was the ultimate mark of a wise man. It was how you built a following.
And Paul just intentionally abandons the best tool in the toolbox.
He creates a deliberate vacuum where his charisma should be.
Verse 2 says, "For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified."
There is that event, again, the crucifixion. The exact thing the rulers misunderstood and thought was a failure. Paul makes that his entire singular focus.
He strips away everything else.
He doesn't come in hot with complex metaphysical theories or political commentary. He comes with the cross.
And look at how he describes his emotional state in verse 3. This is just fascinating to me. He says, "I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling."
Weakness, fear, trembling.
Yeah.
These are not exactly the traits of a strong leader. These are not the traits of a guru or a philosopher king.
No. If I went to a leadership conference today or, tuned into a deep dive and the host was visibly trembling, fearful, and projecting total weakness, I'd probably turn it off.
You want your money back.
I would. I think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He has zero confidence. He's a mess.
By the standards of the wisdom of this age, yes, you would reject him entirely. But Paul explains exactly why he did this in verses 4 and 5. This is the hidden strategic brilliance of his weakness.
He says his message wasn't with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power.
He creates a stark binary choice. Option A is wise and persuasive words, human eloquence. Option B is a demonstration of the Spirit's power.
And Paul chose option B.
Every time.
What does a demonstration really mean in this context?
The Greek word there is apodexis. It's actually a legal term for producing hard evidence in a courtroom.
Oh, interesting.
Paul is saying, I didn't give you a TED Talk. I gave you an encounter. I didn't just talk about God conceptually. God actually showed up.
But why take the risk of looking weak? Why not use eloquence in the Spirit? Why not be a great speaker who also relies on God? Why does he create this forced contrast?
Look at verse 5. This is the crucial why. So that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power.
Ah, that is the crux of his methodology.
It is. Think about the alternative. If Paul had used incredibly clever logic, beautiful rhetoric, and emotional manipulation to convert the Corinthians, what is their faith actually resting on?
It's resting on Paul's ability to debate.
Exactly. It rests on human skill.
Which is incredibly shaky ground.
Yeah.
Because if my faith is built on a really clever argument, someone smarter could just come along tomorrow with a slightly better argument and completely destroy my faith.
Spot on. If I can argue you into the faith, someone else can argue you out of it.
Wow.
But if your faith is built on a demonstration of the Spirit's power, a direct experience of the reality of God that completely bypasses your intellect, that is unshakable. That rests entirely on God, not on the speaker.
So his weakness was actually a calculated way to get out of the way. He wanted to make sure he wasn't the main attraction.
He wanted the medium to match the message.
Say more about that.
You can't preach a crucified Lord, which is the ultimate symbol of weakness and shame by worldly standards, using the tools of worldly power, polish, and arrogance. It's totally incoherent.
That makes perfect sense.
The message of weakness must be preached in weakness to reveal the true power of God behind it.
That is profound. It totally flips the script on how we normally think about influence. Usually we think influence comes from polish, strength, having all the answers, never sweating.
Having the perfect lighting.
Right. But Paul says true spiritual influence actually comes from weakness and total reliance on the Spirit.
It connects right back to the rulers in section 1. They operated in total strength and arrogance, and they missed God completely. Paul operates in weakness and fear, and he manages to reveal God to the entire city of Corinth.
Okay, so we have the mystery, the Spirit as the mechanism, and Paul's method of weakness. Now we really have to talk about the reception of all this. Because, spoiler alert, not everyone gets this.
Far from it.
In fact, Paul draws a very hard line between two distinct types of people in verses 14 and 15.
This is section 4, the Great Divide. Paul basically sorts all of humanity into two buckets based solely on how they process this specific information.
Let's look at the first bucket, verse 14. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness.
Some older translations call this the natural man. The Greek word is psychikos.
Psychikos. So it relates to the psyche.
Yes, it refers to life on the purely biological, soulish, natural level.
So to be clear, this isn't necessarily a bad person or a wicked, malicious person.
No, not at all. It's just a person operating with the default human factory settings. It's a person successfully using the eye and the mind we talked about earlier, but completely lacking the Spirit.
And what is their natural reaction to the deep things of God?
Foolishness.
Just outright foolishness.
That is the inevitable reaction of the natural mind to the mystery. It doesn't just say they disagree politely, it says they think it's absolute nonsense.
And then he adds a phrase that feels kind of harsh to modern ears. He says they cannot understand them.
Cannot. It's an inability, not just a preference.
Right. It doesn't say they choose not to, or they are too stubborn to, or they haven't read enough books. It says they cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit.
Going back to our analogy from earlier, if you do not have the radio receiver, which is the Spirit, you cannot hear the music. It's not that you're deaf. It's that you fundamentally lack the specific apparatus required to pick up that invisible frequency.
And to a person without a radio, watching someone dance around to silent radio waves looks incredibly foolish.
That's a great image. They see the behavior of the Christian, the embracing of weakness, the focus on a crucified man from the 1st century, the prayer, the financial sacrifice, and it just looks like insanity.
It looks like dancing to silence.
Because they are judging it entirely with human wisdom. And by human metrics, the cross is foolish. It's defeat, it's public shame. It makes absolutely no logical sense to worship a man who died a criminal's death.
Only the Spirit reviews it as the ultimate glory.
Exactly.
So if you are a natural person, this whole conversation we're having just sounds like gibberish. But then we have the second character in verse 15. The person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things.
This is the pneumatikos, the spiritual person.
So this person has the apparatus. They have the radio receiver.
They can discern.
They have a much broader data set to work with.
Exactly. They still have the natural faculties. They can still use their eyes and their brain just fine. But they also have the Spirit. So they can see the human wisdom for what it actually is, and they can see God's wisdom for what it is.
They have the full picture.
They do.
But then Paul adds this fascinating little tag at the end of verse 15. But such a person is not subject to merely human judgments.
This implies a really interesting sort of asymmetry.
How so?
The spiritual person can understand the worldly person because we all know what human wisdom looks like. We live in it every day. We were born into it.
Right. It's the default.
But the worldly person cannot understand the spiritual person.
Because they're operating on entirely different planes of existence. It's like a 3D being looking at a 2D world. We can see the square on the paper, we understand how it works, but the square cannot fathom the cube.
Right. The square just sees a cross-section and thinks it's weird. And this is actually a massive protective clause for the believer.
Explain that.
Paul is basically saying, if you are operating by the Spirit, you are off the map of merely human judgments. You aren't playing by their rules anymore, so their critiques and their metrics of success simply don't apply to you.
That is incredibly freeing.
Isn't it?
If you are constantly worried about looking foolish to the prevailing culture, You are exhausting yourself trying to satisfy a judge who doesn't even speak your language.
You are trying to be wise in an age that is coming to nothing. It's a complete waste of time. You are accountable to a much higher court.
That leads us perfectly into the final section of our deep dive. Section 5, the mind of Christ. This is the grand conclusion of the chapter, and it is a heavy hitter.
It really brings it all home. Verse 16 starts with a challenge straight from the Old Testament, quoting Isaiah 40.13. Who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him?
It's a rhetorical question, right?
Yes, absolutely. The implied answer is no one. No human being is smart enough or wise enough or experienced enough to sit down and give God advice.
It emphasizes the massive, unbridgeable distance between us and God.
But then, and this is the craziest pivot, Paul drops the mic. He pivots immediately from that rhetorical question and says, but we have the mind of Christ.
It is a radical, almost scandalous claim to make.
Totally. After spending the entire chapter saying human wisdom can't reach God, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, the rulers completely failed. He ends by saying, but we actually have.
We have the mind of Christ. What does that actually mean, though, based on everything we've just read? Because it clearly doesn't mean we are suddenly all-knowing, omniscient beings.
No, we aren't God. We still forget where we put our keys. But let's synthesize what we've covered today. If we have the mind of Christ, it means we fundamentally share his perspective on reality. We have been invaded by his spirit.
Okay, let's break down the practical implications of that for you, the listener. If I have the mind of Christ, how does that actually change my day-to-day life?
First, it means we have access to that hidden wisdom destined for glory. We are finally in on the secret that the rulers missed. We know what human history is actually about.
Right. We know the end of the story.
Second, it means we value what he values.
The values reversal we talked about.
Exactly. Remember the crucifixion. To the natural human mind, it's just foolishness and failure. To the mind of Christ, it is the ultimate power of God.
So having the mind of Christ means you look at weakness, you look at sacrifice, you look at the cross, and you see true power and glory.
Completely. When you face suffering or weakness in your own life, the human mind immediately says, avoid this at all costs. This is terrible. The mind of Christ says, hold on, this might actually be the path to glory.
That reframes everything. What's the third implication?
It means we understand what has been freely given. We don't have to strive or earn or outsmart anyone to get to God. We operate from a posture of receiving, not a posture of taking.
And fourth, it relates back to that discernment we just talked about. Having the mind of Christ means we can actually make judgments about all things. We can see the world clearly because we are looking through his eyes, not just our own.
Exactly. It's not that we suddenly become arrogant geniuses who know everything about physics and math. It's that we are indwelt by the Spirit who connects us to the thoughts of God, specifically regarding his redemptive plan for the world.
We share his heartbeat.
We do.
This has been, well, dense, but in a really good way. Let's try to summarize this whole journey we've been on for the listener.
Sure, let's recap. We started with a massive problem. The smartest, most powerful rulers of the age killed the Lord of Glory because they lacked hidden wisdom.
They were operating purely on human wisdom, eyes, ears, mind, and they hit a hard ceiling.
Then we saw the solution. The Spirit. The Spirit searches the deep things of God and reveals them to us.
It's like knowing the internal thoughts of another person. Only the Spirit can provide that access because the Spirit is the ultimate insider.
Then we saw the method. Paul, knowing all of this, deliberately abandoned cool rhetoric and persuasive speeches. He embraced weakness and fear so that people's faith would rest on God's actual power, the demonstration of the Spirit, and not on Paul's verbal skills.
And finally, the result. We are separated from the spirit of the world.
Right.
While the natural person thinks spiritual things are foolishness because they lack the receiver, the spiritual person possesses the mind of Christ, which gives us a completely different, elevated way to judge and understand reality.
That is the complete arc, from the tragic failure of human genius to the incredible gift of divine insight.
So why does this matter? I mean, for someone listening right now, maybe walking their dog or driving to work, why should they care about 1 Corinthians chapter 2 today?
I think it matters deeply because we live in a massive information age. We are utterly obsessed with data, with listening to experts, with having smart takes on everything.
We feel immense pressure to understand and opine on everything.
And this text is a hard check on that pressure.
It relieves the pressure, in a way.
It really does. It reminds us that there is a fundamental difference between being informed and being spiritual.
Wow.
You can be the smartest, most informed person in the room, read all the news, and still completely miss the Lord of Glory.
That's so good. True insight, the kind that actually matters for eternity, doesn't come from a high IQ or being persuaded by arguments. It comes from revelation.
Which shifts the pressure entirely off of us to figure it all out and places the focus on simply receiving what the Spirit reveals.
That also completely redefines success.
Yeah.
If you're feeling weak or fearful today, like Paul was, that might actually be the perfect posture for God's power to show up. You don't have to be the smooth talker who has it all together.
Correct. Weakness is very often the delivery system for God's power.
Yeah.
It forces us to rely on Him, which is exactly where He wants us to be anyway.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as we wrap up. We talked about verse 15. The spiritual person makes judgments, but is not subject to human judgments.
Right. The immunity concept.
If you truly possess the mind of Christ, and if the world fundamentally considers the things of the Spirit to be foolishness, does that mean you should actually expect to be misunderstood?
That is the big question.
Think about it. If you are making perfect sense to everyone operating in the spirit of the world, if the rulers of this age are nodding along and agreeing with everything you say, are you actually operating in the mind of Christ?
Or have you just accidentally adopted the wisdom of the age?
Exactly. Is being considered foolish by the smart people of this age actually the very proof that you're on the right track?
As Paul argued so clearly, if they didn't understand him and they crucified him, we probably shouldn't expect them to understand us.
Maybe being misunderstood isn't a sign you're doing it wrong. Maybe it's a sign you're doing it right. You're just hearing the music they can't hear. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.